It's good to be back. It's been about a month since the last video, actually just slightly over 1 month. And not a whole lot to talk about in terms of price changes since that last video, but I think this is a prudent time to talk about the outlook for 2020, what lies ahead, some of the possibilities, also take a quick look back at where we've come from, take a review, so to speak, of the the path so far that Bitcoin's taken in 2019, how that relates to the initial idea that I presented with the 4-year cycle back about a year ago now, in fact, on YouTube. And I want to cover that and also cover some member questions that pop up. In particular, we have 3 or 4 questions that seem to come up more frequently than everything else, and those are on the agenda here. Most importantly, the idea that we've got these cycle lengths that are potentially getting longer. I'm going to talk about the myth of lengthening cycles, and then talk about a little bit about buying altcoins and why I think that's a bad idea going forward. Talk very briefly about the stock to flow ratio, talk about the Bitcoin halving, and then some closing points that I want to cover. So it's going to be a pretty jam-packed video. Don't know how long I'm going to go for. Bear with me, and I'm glad you're here. Let's go. Okay, as always, just want to quickly mention that I'm not a registered broker or advisor. This is not financial advice. What I try to do is just give you some insight into my thinking and my process, how I'm approaching this asset class, how I'm approaching this market. There's a good chance that I will be wrong. That's just the nature of trading and investing and speculating as well. So you need to be mindful of that. There is not one person on this planet that knows what's going to happen, let alone in crypto or anything else. We try and use the information at hand to provide us with an edge, and we try and mitigate any risk around that. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do here. And I try and point out all aspects of investing and trading and how I approach this market. And it's important for you to not just listen to what I have to say and take only what you need or want to fit a bias that you may have from my message. I know a lot of people seem to do that. They talk about maybe some of the price predictions, or at least where I think price might be headed, and kind of ignore the rest of the sort of the caveats or the downside scenarios that I may present. And I think that's very dangerous. It's a total package, it's a total viewpoint that I think you should, if you're going to listen to this, you should try and encompass all of that thinking that I have to offer. Okay, and then lastly, I have no affiliates, no sponsors. I don't have an agenda for you in terms of trying to get something from you. This is free information, free to you and anybody who wants to view it. You are free to do what you want with that information. I ask nothing of you. Perhaps maybe a like or a subscribe on the channel, but otherwise, if you ever see a referral link on any of my pages, then please call me out on that. My whole goal here is to simply give back what I can, and also if there is an agenda, I gotta tell you, it is to spread the word of Bitcoin. I am a big believer in Bitcoin beyond just the speculation, beyond just the financial gain. That's obviously a measurement or a yardstick, but I really am a believer in the sovereignty that this technology and the solution provides. I run multiple nodes, three nodes in fact, that I've built myself and manage. It's not very difficult, but I think it's important. And I try and read up as much as I can on this technology and its future. So for me, I am passionate about it. I do believe in it, even though my angle is more from the investing and trading perspective. I still think it's very important that I do my best to get the word out and to drive adoption, drive demand. I think that is the only way that we can ensure that this succeeds over the long run. It's off to a great start, but we need everybody to get deeper into this, to get beyond the speculation aspect of this, beyond the get-rich thinking, and get behind this technology, and for the right reasons. Okay, so my only request of you is go out, and if you like this video, share it with somebody else as well, and see if we can get other people, new people, to come into this space and to help. So first item on the agenda is where we have come from 2019. In fact, it really begins in December of 2018. That was my first video calling for an end to the 4-year cycle, the previous 4-year cycle, of course, that is. The price action at that point was down to around about $3,700. The market was in free fall, and sentiment was as bad as you can get. Obviously, some of the altcoins were down, or most of the altcoins were down, all down by more than 90%. Most of them down by 96 to 99%. So it was pretty much a bloodbath. At that point, I was looking at the 4-year cycle low coming up, and essentially my call was to buy now. Don't worry about the lows. If you have a long-term horizon, it's going to basically not matter at what price you get. It's low enough. Lows are near, so go and buy. 3 or 4 months after that, the April breakout in the market essentially confirmed what I had already suspected. I was already positioned, of course, long, and had told everybody a couple times to buy long. But the 4-year cycle, in my opinion, at that point was confirmed, and the next call to buy, before it became too late, was made in April 2019. In that video in April, I pretty much laid out a hypothetical path, one of them at least, but my primary view at least, that Bitcoin was going to spend most of 2019 essentially below $6,000, or all that time below $6,000, and accumulating in an accumulation phase of the next secular bull market, or the next 4-year cycle. That obviously in hindsight has already turned out to be incorrect, but the point of that video was not to worry about the price action necessarily, to trust that the next 4-year cycle low was in place, and that you need to not, if you're investing on a long time frame, need not worry about the day-to-day, week-to-week, and even month-to-month for that matter, price fluctuation in Bitcoin, because you're now invested for a 2 to 3 year period and looking at a potential 6-figure sum for Bitcoin a couple of years out, and that was the goal. And that upside surprises were potentially going to come, that there may even be a chance that it breaks higher, but the fact, or the idea was that we would spend most of 2019 accumulating and moving up towards a $6,000 to $7,000 range. And I think that's important because a lot of people look at where Bitcoin is today, coming off a 6-month decline, or actually 7-month decline from $14,000, down 55%. And that's the only thing that they seem to want to focus on, even though they have a long-term time frame. Let me bring that up real quick. So here's the weekly. Everyone's focused on this decline right here and chooses to ignore the position of Bitcoin right now relative to the 4-year cycle low. And we have to take all of that in context when we're looking at this. And that's because either people are just afraid of losing money, over leveraged, or have already lost too much money, and what they want to focus on is the negative aspect and choose their time frame for their bias, ignoring the fact that they wanted to invest or were invested for the long term. When you look at this from a long-term perspective, all I see is one very simple fact, that from the 4-year cycle low only just slightly over 1 year ago, even at a 50% decline in the market, the Bitcoin is up 160%. Now, there is no other asset class in the world that can keep going up with this type of gain, where a lot of the participants are upset or have lost money. And that speaks, I think, in general to the immature or the inexperienced nature of a lot of the people involved in this space, and the fact that there isn't enough discipline here in this space. But for those who can appreciate the longer time frame, which is what I've been trying to illustrate now for all the videos, when you view the market from a long-term lens and appreciate zooming out where it's come from, and where, based on this secular trend, where Bitcoin is likely or potentially going, then you begin to appreciate the fact that these shorter term moves, even though this is a 6 or 7 month in nature, should be ignored at all costs. And if you don't, then you'll fall victim and you fall into the trap of, like you did right here, of capitulating at the very wrong time in a secular uptrend like it is today. So I just wanted to point that out. In fact, I'm going to come back to this video. I want to play a 7-minute clip from the April 2019 video that talks about Bitcoin staying all the way underneath this line up until the January time frame where we are today. And I'm going to do that because it's a segue into my next topic about sort of where Bitcoin is heading and explaining this move to 14,000 in the context of a larger move. So here is the video. 800 to 6,000. First thing I believe is that this 6,000 or $5,800 to $6,000 level on Bitcoin is going to act as some significant resistance. It provided significant support on the way down in the bear market. There was repeated attempts to break below that. Everybody thought that was going to hold and the market was going to go up. I did not, and I don't want to get into necessarily why at this point. But from a descending triangle standpoint, I think the breakdown here was obvious, but at the same time, there's going to be a lot of resistance at this point when it comes back up to test that area. I don't know when it comes to test that area. That's the key or the problem right now. I don't know exactly when we test that point, but I think it'll happen sooner than later. We could even get that in the next week. We can even get that in the next few days. We don't know, but let's just say for argument's sake, we get up here and we test. That will just be the first test. I think at some point, and I'm just going to draw this in again loosely, right? At some point, maybe around the August time frame, we get down, and I don't think we get anywhere near necessarily the December lows. We'd probably get closer to the February lows, okay, around about 3,400. Again, arbitrary numbers I'm throwing out. It's more about time. So I think we get down here and we scare the hell out of the longs. They get worried that it's been kind of 7-8 months since the low. It's taking too long. It's now reversed lower. They start to panic. They're too leveraged, and of course, they bail out. Talked about that 5 minutes ago. Let's move on here. Then I think we come up and we kind of start testing this area a few times. Now, I don't know if we can get above that period, about that 6,000 point in 2019. Gotta be honest with you, gotta be patient here. It takes time to build a solid foundation and a solid base in any new 4-year cycle. But at some point, we probably do get above this $6,000 level. And once we get above that, we may drop quickly back down. But then we get it back above, and then that same level begins to act as support. Okay? And then we can begin to find an area that has less weight and less friction, and we will then begin to accumulate or to begin to rally higher with a little more intensity and velocity. Okay, so welcome back. So the point of that was to essentially illustrate, well, actually one point that it does illustrate is that nobody's right all the time, okay? I did not expect this big move higher, but I held my position all the way through. I didn't dump it, and I didn't get scared in this area, and I held the whole way through. So, like many of you, I'm also still up 160% on my position, and it's been relatively pain-free. But the other point I want to really illustrate is the fact that, as I said, I thought price would be in this sort of $6,000 to $7,000 range by this point in the year. But people still want to focus on the decline since the June top, and try and tell us that because we've had this 50% decline here, that the bull market is never going to get off the ground. It's still a bear market. We're heading for $2,000, $3,000 price prints. But essentially, all that's happened is we had this huge impulse move. And there are many theories and reasons why, but coming out of a deep bear market right here at an 85% correction, there was a lot of short covering initially. Then there was a lot of whales and other people that pushed the market higher. Then there was a whole lot of FOMO and retail. Obviously, a lot of people got hurt again. Didn't learn the lesson of not getting in early, getting in late, getting too much leverage, not being able to hold it on the way down. Whatever the reason that this impulse move occurred, I think what also happened was it's unique to Bitcoin in terms of its price action over past cycles. People weren't expecting that, and I'm included in that. I was expecting more of an accumulation down in this bottom area, going higher. Nobody really expected this, and everybody jumped in, FOMO'd in, thinking it's going to go right above 20,000 rapidly and quickly again, and it didn't, okay? But essentially, I think what's still happening is, if we look at it from a longer term trend, I still think we're heading higher like this. So all we did was we overshot significantly to the upside, and we're now reverted back to the mean, okay, or back to something similar to prior and previous bull market accumulation phases. I think now 1 year removed, and I don't know if that's today, and I'll cover that in a little while. I don't know if that's starting right now with this big weekly bar that I'm showing you here. It's irrelevant to me right now. We've seen other ones, but at some point this downtrend is going to end. I think it's going to end very soon, and I think there's going to be a continuation of that accumulation phase, and then eventually we're going to get more into an awareness phase up in this area here, and then the bull market will continue as such. So I just want to point that out. I don't think there's anything wrong with Bitcoin sitting 160% higher today, just 12 months later. If you and the fact that there is so much negative sentiment still out there towards Bitcoin because of the decline of recently tells us that we're still very, very early in the next 4-year cycle bull phase. Still a lot of negative sentiment out there. Still a lot of people hurting from this, from this adventure. And it doesn't help that a lot of the altcoin space, where a lot of people are exposed to, very few people are 100% and only 100% exposed to Bitcoin. A lot of people are overly exposed to altcoins. And so even though Bitcoin might be up 160%, most of the altcoins are down. They're down certainly versus BTC. A lot of them are down versus a fiat currency. And that's hurting. So the sentiment is therefore expectedly bearish and negative. And that's good from a new bull market perspective. That's where we want to be sentiment-wise. So plenty of time left and plenty of room left to go higher from this point. So I think, in summary, for this point on the agenda, we are at or where I had expected we would be a year out. How we got here was not how I expected, but holding on to positions was the message, and the only message I wanted to give you 9 months ago and a year ago, to ignore price and focus on holding your position. And for those that did, you're now sitting pretty with a strong hand up 150, 160% and ready for hopefully what will be the next exciting stage of 2020 bull market. So the 2020 outlook, where we go from here, and what is the 4-year cycle view? Well, I think it's kind of just what I've been talking about in most of these videos. If you go back to the original 4-year cycle video, if you go back to the one in April, the fact that we are roughly at the point from a price perspective in the cycle that I thought tells me, well, that we are still essentially on track for that longer term narrative and the possibility of Bitcoin breaking out through 20,000 and doing a 5 or 10x like it has done in the prior 4-year cycles. Nothing of that has changed for me. I think we're going to get, so I'm not going to be here to try and predict price. Obviously in April I didn't do a great job of the short-term price, but I think we have a good chance, 70% or so, that we have a low right here. Maybe another 15% chance that we come back at some point, retest this area, low 6,000s, and then maybe exceed that on the low side one more time, maybe as low as the high 5,000s, and then we go end the downtrend and then begin a nice and solid, consistent uptrend. That's what I think. I still think there's probably a 10% chance, 15 maybe, I don't know how high it is, that this here is a 4-year cycle top. Now, I get a lot of people say, well, is your 4-year cycle dead, or is it not working out? And some trolls will even laugh, for example, that it's going all the way down. Well, look, let me be very clear here, and please pay attention if you want to learn more about cycles. Cycles are only a snapshot over time. When I say, I believe Bitcoin may be going up to the 6-figure range over this 4-year cycle period, that's not the 4-year cycle. That's just saying that based on prior 4-year cycles, I believe in this next 4-year cycle, we're going to see something similar repeat, okay, based on where it stands in the technology evolution based on where it stands from a market cap standpoint. There are reasons why I believe the next 4-year cycle will be similar to the prior 4-year cycles, and that's why we're going to head up towards that area. But that doesn't mean it has to happen that way. There's a chance that this 4-year cycle is what we call left translated. In the prior videos and the markings are still here, I show a bull trend of 3 years and a bear trend of 1 year. That's a typical right translated cycle, meaning that for the majority of the 4-year period, price is moving higher, and where the top occurs is the peak of the cycle, and then the actual end of the cycle is the low. And because this is a bull cycle, it spent more time going up. Anything that spends more time going up than going down should, in theory at least, have from one low to the next low an appreciation in price. And I just think we need one more of those cycles. So for that reason, I think we have a 150-week move higher. Maybe it's only 120, maybe it's even longer, we don't know. Point being, I see a repeat-like cycle here over the next 100, and let's just call it, I'm sorry about that, 100, well at the moment here it's 110 that's outlined, but it could be up to 150. Point being that all the way up into this 2021 time frame, and more likely to be the late 2021 time frame, I see Bitcoin heading higher, similar to prior cycles. How we get there again is kind of where we were in the April video and last year's video. I don't know, right? But I would say that at some point, maybe by the end of this year, 2020, there's a chance we get up to test the 20,000 or the all-time high levels. I don't know. I think this 14,000 high is probably going to give us more of a resistance than this 20 level high. If you do recall back, it spent just 2 or 3 weeks going up from 10 to 20, and then just 3 or 4 weeks coming back down below 10,000 as well. There's not much up there. There's more up here between 10, more recently at least, between 10 and 14. I think once we clear 14, I think we'll get some resistance at 14 at some point in the maybe the October, November time frame, and potentially shoot through. I don't think we'll get as much resistance as we probably expect at that $20,000 level. Again, not here to predict price. I'm looking at this more from a time standpoint and looking at prior cycles and trying to come up with a guide that's going to help. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that we spend, I'm going to try and draw this looking at, okay, so here's that $14,000 level. Let's call it maybe July. Okay, let's maybe a couple of attempts, maybe a big shakeout of some type, and then maybe not so pronounced there, but you get the point. And then back up to this, here's December, so maybe not until January of next year, maybe not until, let's just call it maybe not until February or March of next year, do we not get to the $20,000 level. But as we've seen during prior bull markets and the type of behavior that you see in other asset classes, when they make an all-time high, there is a level of FOMO that's next level. It's next level retail-like FOMO. And for that reason, you begin to see a real acceleration in the gains, and possibly just over maybe no more than a 9-month period. It could even be much less than that. Do you get the final extension from one prior bull market high to the next bull market high? We saw that in 2017 as well, and we saw that in prior bull markets as well. You get this really sharp move over just a number of months. Now, again, don't know how long that takes. Let's just call it, just for argument's sake, up to 120 by September 2021. And there is the bear box. Okay, so this here is, let's just stretch this out. There's 150 bars, which is 150 weeks. That's 3 years out of a 4-year cycle going higher. That leaves 1 year of a cycle going lower into the next low, maybe as far back as the 25,000, 30,000. I'm not sure what the range is. But if prior bear markets are any indication, we may even say we get to the 150,000 range. Again, just for argument's sake, don't go out and get all excited because I said that, but let's call this an 80% decline. So there you go, 80% decline from 150 is down to the 30,000 area, and then you get all the way back, and you get down to 25. So you retrace most of those gains, just as we did if you look at this bull market right here. The prior high back in November of 2013 was at sort of the 1200 area, and we retraced all the way back down to the 3100 area. So significant retracement in all bear markets for Bitcoin, and that level of retracement is also a function of just the amount of gains that you see in the bull market phase as well. So the volatility goes both ways in Bitcoin. Extreme volatility goes both ways in Bitcoin. All right, so that really is my outlook for 2020, and it doesn't really change much if you look at prior charts from a year ago. Again, the difference being kind of this, how we got to that point, which means we may have another different path going forward to this point. We may be doing a 2021 outlook video in 1 year time, and price may be right at the $17,000 or $18,000 price point, but it may have gotten there a whole, entirely different path. It may have shot up to 30,000 and then came all the way back down, or it could have even spent a number of more months down in the $6,000 and $7,000 range, maybe until the summer, and then shot all the way up again. The point being is that we're up 160% from the bottom. If we believe in the bull market narrative going forward, if we believe in the same bull market narrative that presented last year, and if you believe in the path it's taken over the last 11 years in general, if you believe in the secular bull market, then you need to hold your position and you need to be patient with Bitcoin, and again realize the time frame that you're investing on, and stop getting caught up in the social media and all the fuss and all the price action on the day-to-day, week-to-week basis. It's not going to serve you well. Most of you are probably not experienced and good enough to be able to handle those movements anyway. Trying to get cute, trying to accumulate more Bitcoin, for example, is not going to serve you well in the end, because the market is too volatile, moves too quickly, and you're going to be caught offside far too often, meaning that you end up with less Bitcoin, okay, than you started with, because you tried to get cute on the market, and a lot of times you end up buying back the Bitcoin, FOMOing at the wrong time because you thought you may be able to get out, to preserve some short-term profit. Just don't do that. It never really works. And, to be honest with you, there's no reason to do that. Bitcoin, if this works, okay, and it's an if. Everything's an if. If it works, we're talking about a 20, 30x type move. Again, something you don't see throughout history. So don't mess with that. Why are you trying to get more out of something that's already extraordinary? There's no point. It doesn't make any logical sense. It's not rational to try and get out and get more profit than what no other asset class can offer you. So just keep that in mind. Keep that always in mind. I think that's a message I've been trying to instill in you from the very beginning. Okay, so that's my outlook. Nothing really surprising, I think, to many of you who have been following the channel for a while. Stick with it as a goal. It's more about the psychology. It's more about the patience. It's more about the execution than it is about the price, okay? Just worry about the time. If you have to lock this thing away and not watch another video for another year or two, do that. If you keep your risk level reasonable, and again, I've also been harping on risk, keep your risk level to the point where if the worst case scenario does come out, and it doesn't work out again, right? We don't want to be in a position where we've put everything into this and we've lost. That's not what I want you to do. I'm certainly not doing that. Of course, it would hurt if Bitcoin collapsed for whatever reason and spent its entire time down in the $3,000 and $2,000 range. But it wouldn't necessarily hurt me that much. I got in early enough. But for many of you who didn't, you don't want to be in a position where you're in debt now because it was something like that. So that's also an important piece and element. I can never do a video without really stressing that, because it's kind of that risk fanaticism that I have in me in all my trading. I don't like losing. I don't like losing what I've already gained. I don't mind missing out on the profit. I just don't like losing what I already have. And that's just something I've always stuck with and lived by. So I think that's a very important lesson to have. All right, let's move on. Getting into the member questions now, and it seems like this one's a popular question, and that is the cycle getting longer? in Bitcoin? And the answer is no, it's not. Cycles don't get longer. Cycles are essentially, I wouldn't call them a fixed length, but their period is relatively fixed, and the lows or the end of the cycles will occur within kind of a reasonable margin on either side of that from a time perspective. People on, I guess, on YouTube or everywhere else kind of want to be talking about the peaks of the cycle getting longer, and the peaks can vary and do vary, and that's the very nature of cycles, but the troughs do not. Where the cycle ends does not change, and that's where every cycle, mathematically, for the last 100 years since cycle research became a real serious study, that's how a cycle is measured. It's measured by the low to the low, not the top. The top is just one element of the cycle, and the top of the cycle determines exactly where the translation of the cycle. So the cycle lows are a consistent time frame, but the highs are not. And if you see here in an uptrend, and you see the black line underneath here, the black line here represents a longer time frame and a longer cycle. So here's one cycle, and here's the next cycle low. Okay, let's call this, for argument's sake, a 4-year cycle low from here to here. Each of these could be a 1-year cycle that are in between. As the 4-year cycle is going higher, you get the 1-year cycle topping further along beyond the midpoint, making this right translated. That's how you get the price gains, and then you get a shorter duration lower into the low. Then you have a similar thing on the second, and it's somewhat of a similar cycle in the third. You notice the third may top in the midpoint and not so much to the right of it, because the gains aren't as much. And then though, in the last cycle of the 4-year cycle, it could be a 16-year cycle. The bottom one here could be a 16-year cycle, and these are the 4-year cycles in Bitcoin. We could be at the third one right now, for example, starting that out. But you see here, when the market, when the longer term trend is in a downtrend, and it's going to come for Bitcoin, okay, it's not going to go up indefinitely, regardless of what model you want to believe. At some point, you will get multi-year periods of bear markets, and when that happens, the 4-year cycle is going to top early. It's going to become a left translated cycle. So the idea that these peaks have to go further and further apart is just, well, it's just wrong. That's all it is. And it's the peak here that determines the translation of the cycle as it relates to the longer term trend or longer term cycle, and that's how you get that longer term cycle to come down and dip into its final low. So the top only affects, or does affect, the translation, which then drives the longer term cycle and a longer term trend. And that's the explanation for this. So that's why looking at looking at the peaks here, just because you've had 1 or 2 consecutive tops or bubble peaks that were further apart does not necessarily or should mean that the next one's going to be further apart. There's just it's just clutching at straws, essentially. It's no mathematical logic behind that. Really what you're going to be looking at is the lows. The lows are what count in cycles and not the tops. Okay? Alright, this is going to be probably a 4 or 5 minute discussion on buying altcoins. A lot of people asking me about buying altcoins, which ones I like, which ones should I buy. Let me be very clear. This is a Bitcoin HODL story. Not because I only want to focus on Bitcoin, but because I only think you should focus on Bitcoin. I'm certainly only, for the most part, at least from a long-term standpoint, focusing on Bitcoin. And altcoins for me have no place in a long-term strategy. Now, some of you are going to immediately sort of laugh at this statement. A lot of you are going to scoff at this and going to say, well, Ethereum did X in 2016-17 and some other examples did so and so. And that's true. And some of them will do that again. But the thought that you're going to pick the one that did that is just ludicrous. The white paper that you love so much, or the coin that you happen to stumble on in some Discord channel or Telegram channel or some tweet that got you hooked and excited, is not going to get you there. Most likely not going to get you there. There's 5,000 or so coins listed on the market cap coin site. probably around about 5,000 have already come and gone. So if you think you're going to ride the 5, the 10, or even the 20 out of the thousands and thousands to riches, it doesn't make any sense to me. But then not only that, are they going to outperform Bitcoin? And are you going to be able to hold those gains all the way through, not sell, and actually capture the gains at the top? If you begin to put all those pieces together, I guarantee you very, very, very few of you are going to be able to do any level of outperformance to Bitcoin in the next 2 or 3 years because of that reason. But I think more importantly, it comes back to why you believe so strongly in some altcoin project. And let's get it straight. You don't care about the technology. You don't care about the promise or the scalability or the speed or whatever it is that they have as buzzwords. You care about, and you're only concerned about making a lot of money. That's what piques your interest. That's why you bought thousands or millions of some at the moment worthless coin, thinking if it goes up by however X%, you're going to be very rich because of it. Somehow you're going to hold all the way through and you're going to believe in it. And that's what you've convinced yourself, and that's what allows you to risk so much of your capital on a project like that, because you kind of hide for the facts that you already know. But I want to ask you, if we're talking about Bitcoin with a dominance of 75% out there for 11 years, has seen thousands and thousands of coins come and go. For your coin to outperform Bitcoin, Bitcoin still has to perform similar to what I outlined previously in this video. Bitcoin is the stable coin of the crypto world. Bitcoin is the path forward for the crypto world. If Bitcoin fails, I can almost guarantee you it's not a case of some other coin coming along and just taking over the mantle and going. It's not going to work that way. If Bitcoin goes into a bear market for 2 years or 3 years or 4 years for whatever reason, then all those coins you're holding are going to be worthless, completely worthless. So knowing that, okay, and I think that's a statement that I can stand by and really believe without any bias. If Bitcoin has to go higher on the entire to drag the entire space higher with it. So if I'm outlining a scenario where Bitcoin's going to go up 10, 15, 20, and 30x, okay, which is generational like performance, why are you adding in multiple levels of risk, okay, to get maybe double that performance? It doesn't make any sense. And I mean, I'm not even talking about multiples. It's many hundreds of multiples more risk, because you have to pick the right projects in the space of 5,000 coins. You have to be able to hold it if you're on the right one. You have to be able to be disciplined enough to not jump ship to the other one that's doing well, the one that you thought you were going to buy, or the one that your buddy bought, or the guy that you're following on Twitter bought and you didn't. And jumping between the two just as it crashes while the one you were holding goes up. And many different scenarios like that occur during very fast and speculative markets. It's just not easy to do. It's almost impossible to do. I mean, for most people here, riding Bitcoin 10x, 15, 20, and 30x is very, very difficult to do. So if you think you're going to ride some altcoin 1000x or 2000x, I guarantee you're not. Okay, so don't try and do it. I think the path here, the sound path, is to stick with a reasonable allocation of Bitcoin, a reasonable enough where you can hold it all the way through, at least to close to the highs, to a really nice, comfortable level, and start to sell some off and start to realize some of those gains, and then be ready for the next bear market low in 3 or 4 years' time, and do it again and reaccumulate, but reaccumulate with significantly more Bitcoin, because you have significantly more capital available to you. Okay, so that's my question on altcoins. Please stop asking me. Well, you can keep asking, but you'll kind of get the similar answer again. I don't believe it. Now, I will trade altcoins, and I trade them often enough, especially when I see the entire altcoin space doing well in a shorter time frame. But that's not what we're talking about. All these questions were, which is the project that's going to unseat Bitcoin? Which is the one that's going to be the next world reserve currency, or the next banking coin that all the banksters all of a sudden want. Those types of questions. It's not happening. At least if it does happen, the chances of you taking it and riding it are next to none. So stick with Bitcoin is my advice. Okay, lots and lots of questions on the stock to flow ratio. Looks exciting, right? Those charts look amazing. I think a lot of you guys love the stock to flow because it points to these huge riches, right? And it's a model that supposedly is pretty much guaranteed because it has such a high level of back-tested statistics behind it and so on. Look, I'm not here to tell you right or wrong. I haven't looked enough into it, so I'm not qualified enough to critique somebody else's work. It just comes up so often that I want to at least make some mention to it. From what I can tell, however, that if you can make the assumption that Bitcoin's demand continues to grow, then there is a lot of logic behind the fact that if the supply rate begins and continues to decline, which is obviously in the code and schedule, then it stands to reason that the price will go up. But I'm not entirely convinced that that logic works all the way through. And maybe my understanding of that logic is incorrect, and I apologize if that's the case. But I think the level of demand is not also as important as you think. I think what's more important is what valuation does the market want to place on the total supply of Bitcoin. So I don't think it's as relevant about the amount of new supply that comes on board. It is what is the dollar value of all the Bitcoin that's out there that the market wants to have, okay? So we need to increase, and it's all about the demand. If there's 15 million coins out there today and it goes to 16 million next year, for example, it's really irrelevant. It's how much Bitcoin from a market cap standpoint do we want to hold? Does the market want to own and hold? That's going to drive the price up for Bitcoin. I think what I'm trying to say here also is that scarcity alone, and I know the model is not only about scarcity, but known supply and scarcity in the supply alone cannot be an absolute predictor of price over the long term. There are other variables that I believe may be ignored. And again, I'm using words like maybe, I'm not sure, okay? But again, I think demand and what the market, how much of this the market wants to hold, hedge funds and family offices and people who are buying a lot of the Bitcoin in bulk, and not a lot of you guys. A lot of you guys kind of want the BTC. You want the Bitcoin. You want maybe one whole Bitcoin to own and to hold forever. So I know you guys think more about the actual Bitcoin number, but I gotta tell you, a lot of the big money does not. They care about their dollar weighting of Bitcoin as an element of an overall portfolio or an overall risk strategy. So they're saying, I want 10 million exposure, I want 100 million exposure, I want X% of a portfolio of exposure, and so on. So it's all about, in my opinion, again, how much the market at this point in this stage of its evolution, how much the market wants to hold of this asset class that matters. And yes, of course, reducing the amount of new supply. It's not reducing the supply. Okay, a lot of people like to say reduce supply. It's reducing the inflation rate. Does have some impact on that, clearly. But again, it's all about how much we want to hold and own of this asset class. Okay, Bitcoin halving, probably the most, I guess, not controversial, but the most debated topic in all of Bitcoin. And if you just listen to what I said about the stock to flow, you probably will have an idea of what I'm about to say. And that is, I don't really believe much in the Bitcoin halving narrative. And people are like, what? You have a 4-year cycle. The Bitcoin halves every 4 years. Yes, it's a coincidence as far as I'm concerned. Most or many other major asset classes have a 4-year cycle. It's a very common cycle. I don't think it plays. I don't have enough evidence, at least, to say that that's the reason. It certainly fits well. It helps. But again, I don't think the supply halving, the new supply issuance halving, is having as an effect that you think it has. It is the most telegraphed event in any commodity. Okay, it's a known event that miners and buyers and everybody can plan for and especially now with derivative and futures markets can also prepare for. So I don't think it has any bearing whatsoever on the technical aspect of the supply-demand equation for Bitcoin. However, here's the caveat. It is ingrained in Bitcoin psychology. It's a meme at this point. So it has a psychological impact and effect on the market that it can help and will help, I think, drive the market high. I don't think you're going to see this, boom, there's the halving, and then boom goes price. Because if you look at the halving, and here's something people don't want to talk about a lot. If you look at the last bull market in 15, or last halving, I should say, or 16, it dropped by like, I don't know, 10 or 20%. Price dropped after the halving and took like a month to recover, or 3 weeks to recover. Sorry, I have the chart in front of me, but it dropped, right? So, and then if you look at it from a longer time frame slightly, it's just the halving sits right in the middle of a nice big accumulation and uptrend. Okay, there's a little more evidence that the halving in the first halving had more of an impact, but not so much now. So, and the last one. So I think people are reaching. Again, maybe it's biased, maybe it's this need to, this get rich thinking and the speculation aspect of Bitcoin that's driving people to promote this narrative that the next halving is all we're waiting for. It's going to solve every problem. I just don't see that and don't believe that. Again, but from a psychology standpoint, it plays a role. Okay, closing points. Let me try and summarize this pretty quickly. So 2019 was a great year in my opinion, even though a lot of people probably lost or didn't do as well in crypto, even though Bitcoin was up year to year, something like 140%. Amazing year as far as Bitcoin's concerned. I think price today stands roughly or even slightly higher than where I thought it would a year ago. I think that's a positive. Overall, from a technology standpoint, I think there's been great progress being made. I think the ecosystem, the developer environment, I think the amount of new capital, the amount of new onboarding of technology that's coming on is still progressing really, really strongly. So I think overall it's very healthy. The network is continuing to prove very resilient. Hash rates continue to increase. Transactions continue to increase. I think the whole, the forking, the blockchain size, debate is kind of being put to bed, right? There are alternative options out there for bigger blocks, and quite frankly, there hasn't been a demand for it, one. And two, the market is not pricing them. Basically, the market has said the big blocks don't have are not valid, and not the path forward. And there are reasons for that. Technically, I believe it's the whole. Mostly it's about the decentralization aspect of and the self-sovereignty aspect of Bitcoin that the bigger blocks don't necessarily provide, at least not in the future. Okay, and the market, I believe, is pricing that in. So overall, I don't see much that's changed in a year. I'm just as excited as I was a year ago. I still have all my stack and more. And I think 2020 is going to be a very good year. And I just don't want to look back in a year or two, and hopefully you won't, and look at price at the area or in the range that we've been talking about for the last year and not have a position or have a smaller position. Okay, again, don't go out and bet everything and get into debt. Of course, don't do that. I know a lot of you do, and it's sad because I know a lot of you lost. I've got the emails and the DMs, and I'm sorry about that. Hopefully everyone learns from that. But we just don't want to be in a position where we let an opportunity like this go by and not at least take advantage of it to a significant extent. And that's really my goal. This is the reason why I'm sharing these videos. Hopefully, if I can help some of you, then that's great. But again, I just want to... And I also, one last point. There's quite a lot of other videos that I've made here on psychology, for example, on execution and trading. Go watch them again because they are just as important. They are important. They are how you get through this next coming period if it does progress, and also if it does decline. Like I said, there's a 10% chance or so that it lingers for 6 months. It gets back down to whatever number it is. We just don't know in trading and investing. And being prepared, at least psychologically for that, mentally, is going to be very important if we do get to that point. We always have to be prepared for the worst case scenarios as well. All right, I just want to thank you again. If you can, give it a like, give it a share it on social media, share it with friends, get some friends involved. Not from a price standpoint, don't tell them about the massive gains that can come or the riches that can come. Try and explain it, from the Bitcoin and what Bitcoin means to you. And hopefully, if it doesn't mean anything but speculation, then maybe you should go out and read about it first, read some books, and then get more acquainted with that aspect of it before going out. But that's also important for everybody to do. Again, thank you very much. I appreciate you listening and following. Wishing you all the best, a happy 2020, a prosperous 2020, good health and happiness. Thank you.